Good afternoon, everybody. For all of you folks that just showed up, this is James Mongrain. He's our guest artist here this week, and he's just begun. He's going to make a dragon, and so he's gathered some clear glass or some blue glass out of our furnace over there on the far right, some copper blue. He's got about 3 gathers, and he's going to get ready to drop this into a mold called an optic mold. I'm not sure which one he's going to use. Jason's bringing over this other long mold. But they both have, I believe, 12 ribs. So this is the setup of the body of the dragon. He's just shaping it on this table called a marvering table to a tapered cylinder. Once he drops it into the mold, he's going to have ribs on the surface of the glass. Then he'll start to shape the body of the dragon. Now for this particular setup, he's going to trail a thin trail of blue glass from the top to the bottom. So here he goes. He drops it into the mold. He's going to take a quick reheat. He'll come over to the bench and start to squeeze in, kind of separate the glass. If you look closely, you can see those ridges on the surface of the glass. This is Jason Christian. He's his assistant. We're all going to be helping out a little bit. This is a pretty complicated piece. There's a lot of things going on. With this next part, he's going to be, like I said, threading the glass from the top to the bottom. He's going to make it quite a bit longer. If you guys have any questions, just get my attention. We'll try to answer anything you'd like to know. So he's been working on these similar pieces all morning long. We just finished putting a dolphin into the annealing oven over here. We have, I believe, 4 pieces in there already. This will be the 5th one. He's just using this big fluffy torch to spot heat the top of that. You can really see where it's starting to elongate, starting to stretch out right there from the top. Now he's going to use the metal jacks to squeeze in a really sharp constriction right off the end of the iron. Now this is how we're going to remove it from the blowpipe here after we're finished putting the trail on there. Now even though he's on a blowpipe, this is a solid piece of glass. There's no bubble inside of it. Jim's been working on this body of work for a while. Now, I've known that he's made a lot of goblets, and usually a Venetian goblet is much smaller. You'll see either a swan goblet or a dolphin goblet or a dragon goblet. Well, these pieces, he's really supersized. I think all of the pieces that he's making this morning are going to be lids for large vessels. He was here last summer, and he made a vessel that was about this tall. So it had 2 seahorses on the side of it. Then he'll make a covered lid for the top of it with a seahorse on it. You can see how much longer the piece gets. The longer it is, it gets a lot harder to control it. You see it's really moving around quite a bit. It's keeping everything nice and centered. He wants it fairly straight when we put that wrap on there. We have 2 sets of rollers over here there are 2 wheels that are offset, and he'll put it on the wheels, start way out here at the end, and he's going to wind the trail on it. You'll see it'll go from the top to the bottom. So Jason's going to start the wrap. Now this is something we have to do all in one shot. So all the temperature, the timing has to be just right. Eric Meek, he's standing over here to the right. He's got a paddle in his hand. He'll probably stand at the end to keep the tip of it straight. If it starts to fall off center too much, it's going to be flopping up and down as we're trying to trail it on there. I'm going to back Jim up in the back of the iron just to hold it down. When we stick it out at the end, only a little bit of it's off of the right side. So he's just pushing those farther back, give it a little bit wider trail. If you have them straight, it's just a straight trail, just one loop around. As you turn it back, the farther back it is, the wider the trail is set apart. So Chris has got a big fluffy torch. He's going to be heating the dragon's body. This is going to keep the temperature hot so the wrap stays connected. If it gets too hot, the wrap's not going to stick to it. So there's a lot of things happening all at once. All right, so I believe Jim's ready. He just said okay. He's going to take a quick flash, just a quick overall heat in our reheating furnace. Chris is ready with a torch. Eric's ready with a paddle. And Jason's gathering the bit. So Jason will set this bit up so it trails off of the iron. He leaves a lot of the glass on the rod. You don't want it off the iron so it pulls off in one big lump. So he pulls out the tip. He'll cut it with a pair of shears, just so it's a fine thread coming off the end. Again, Jim's going to flash it. Jason's tapering the bit up. You'll see he'll put it all the way forward. You can see just the handle back here is hanging off. So, all right.
Push down on that.
Yep. Look at that, like a pro. Sometimes we even clap for things that go really well. I was holding my breath. I think that's the third one we've done. Each one has gotten consistently better. And that's really because of the team. We're not really used to working with Jim. Now, Jason Christian he's Jim's #1 assistant, so he's worked with him for about 7 years. They both have many years of experience. Jason's been blowing glass for about 18 years. Jim's been blowing glass for over 30. They're both from Seattle, Washington. That's actually where Jim lives now, but I think, Jim, aren't you from Minnesota?
I am.
International Falls. So you can really see that's moving around. It's very hot. This is where he makes it look very easy. It's super hot. It's really moving around. And he's shaping it into the shape that he wants just by twisting the iron, holding it with the shears a particular way. Now these paddles that he's using right here, these are cork paddles. So the material is just like a cork you'd find in a wine bottle. They work really well for shaping the glass without marking it up. Again, you're going to see Jim use this fluffy torch quite a bit because that thread that he applied, it's very thin. That thread cools very quickly. If it cools too quick or cools too much, it's going to snap off of there. So they're going to get ready to transfer it. Actually, Jim said he's changed his mind. He wants to put a little bit on there to begin with. I'm not sure what bit it is, but the bottom of the dragon is the little curl. The top where he's torching it right now is going to be the head of the dragon. Now Eric, he's going to be flashing the piece. It's just a quick overall heat to make sure that it stays hot. You'll see him use the reheating furnace to flash the whole piece and that fluffy torch to specifically heat certain areas. All right, Jim's looking for those pair of crimps. Again, Jason has gathered a bit, shaped it in a very specific way, so when they add it, the glass will flow off of his rod onto the piece very evenly. So you can see he holds it straight up and down. It doesn't just fall off into a big lump. Look at how it trails very evenly all the way down to the bottom. Now he didn't go all the way to the end. While it's still really hot, he can crimp it. Now that's the same colored glass, that copper blue, but you can really see the difference in temperature. So I think he's going to go in where he cut it with the shears. He'll grab each one of those points and pull it out with the tweezers. Jason's going to hold this these MAP gas bottles, a torch on both sides. This is going to really heat it up so he can pull it out, really separate it. It's all these little fine details that really make the piece stand out at the end. Does anybody have any questions so far? All right. Yes. Do you have a question up there? Great. How heavy is it? Well, he's got 3 gathers of glass. I would say this is probably maybe 5 or 6 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you think about putting a 5-pound bag of sugar on a broomstick and try to keep it turning all the time, or say a rock that size on the end of a shovel, because it's all the way at the end, it's a lot heavier to lift. In terms of scale, though, this is a really small piece for Jim. He's really used to making large work. And when I say large, anywhere between 75 and 100 pounds. If you try sticking 100 pounds on the end of a 4-foot blowpipe, the weight is unbelievable. And that's where the team aspect really comes in. He's not trying to do it all himself. He'll have, 4 or 5 or 6 guys helping him out, doing, different parts of the process. So he just really heated that part of the bit that he added on. Looks like he's pushing it down over, and I think that that's where they're going to punty the piece to, right there in that section. So Jason just told Jim he's going to give him a core gather. So this first gather is actually the core. They'll let that get very cold, and then they're going to gather over top of that. By letting that first gather get very cold, the second gather stiffens up, but they can attach it, crimp it in, and really shape it to the shape that they need to break the piece off. You can see he's dipping it in a bucket of water right now, really chilling it. Now this is actually being live streamed right now on the museum's web channel, and you can go on your computer and watch this. I think they even have a place where you can ask questions on the live stream. Or you guys can just ask them right now. All right, so here they go. They're going to get ready to attach it to this solid rod. He gathered a little bit of blue over top of it, so that's blue glass on the punty. So when they remove part of that, that'll stay attached to it. He'll use these diamond shears to cut in and around. Just a little bit of water right there on that jack line that he made right off in the beginning. And it breaks right off just like that. So when you first start blowing glass, that's where things go wrong. Trying to figure out the temperature of attaching the punty and having it cold enough at the top. Getting that temperature just right. It's pretty tricky, especially in the beginning. So usually what happens is the punty's too cold. You go to break it off, it falls off both irons and hits the floor. That's a really great shot up there on the television screen. Look at the detail you can see. You can see each one of those individual thread wraps. You can see how evenly spaced they are too, where Jim adjusted the wheels on there to get that real even spacing. So you can really see where he's focused the heat on the top. That's where he wants to change it. Stretching the neck out. You can see he just doesn't grab it and just yank it. He really is like watching it, watching the temperature, drawing it very evenly. And if it's not pulling exactly the way he wants it, he can spot heat it with that big fluffy torch. So he was just heating the end of it. You can see it's a little fatter up there at the top. Probably wants to make it a little bit thinner. So he's just going to stretch it again. Now if he stretches it too far, it's really hard to go back the other way to make it thick again. So he's really careful to get it right the first time. So for the smaller scale dragon, it'll have they usually put the face on there, cut the mouth in, and then they have two pretty big sized wings on the side of it. So these wings will be really fun to watch. So Jim is actually going to be here in town for 2 weeks. The first week he's doing demonstrations so the public can watch. But next week he's doing a residency of the artists or at the studio. But anybody can still go in and watch it. There's a set of bleachers over there. There'll be nobody narrating or talking about the process, but you can actually watch him make his work. I'm sure a lot of the local glass artists will be over there next week if they have time to sit and watch him work. So Jason's thinking of the bit that he needs to bring. He just took a small gather. He kind of hung out for a few seconds and let that cool off so he could go back in the furnace, and he was able to gather quite a bit more. Again, he'll shape that bit over there with the tweezers and the shears. Kind of holds the back of the iron down while he pulls out and trims some of that off the front. Now he's rolling it on the table to get that nice taper. And when he brings it over, you'll see how evenly that'll pull off of there. He holds it nice and level. When Jim is ready for it, he'll hold the shears up, and Jason will bring it straight up and down. And watch this, it'll trail it all the way down. Look how evenly that pulls off of there. So he kind of separates the bit, then he takes the tweezers and pulls it out a little bit. And occasionally you'll notice that he's heating the glass on the rod, the punty iron. Very important to keep that part hot also. Really, the iron is drawing a lot of temperature out of the glass. When things start to break, usually they'll start to break from the punty all the way up into the piece. So you'll see him spot heat that. Again, just making sure that his tools are the right temperature. Now this is a really nice way of making a piece all out of a solid colored glass. So we melted a tank of copper blue. We had our melting specialist mix up a batch of the copper blue, and he's been testing it every day for about the last 3 days to make sure it's just right. And if we were going to use clear glass and make copper bits, Jason would have to gather the clear, roll it in crushed up colored glass called frit, little chips of glass, and then he would have to heat it in, melt them into the surface, shape it up, and then bring it over. So you could see it would make the process a lot longer. Right here he's doing the head of the dragon. This looks like a very scary dragon, doesn't it? Yes. Where did James train? James, we have a question. Where did you get your training from? He went to the Massachusetts College of Art. He's been blowing glass for about 30 years, so he's worked in many, many different studios. And I like to say it's something that you never really stop learning. This, I believe, is a pretty new body of work for Jim, and I'm sure that he's been learning each time he makes it to make it a little better, a little quicker. Currently, he has his own studio where he works out of in Mukilteo, Washington, but he also works at the Boathouse, which is Dale Chihuly's studio. So he's the head gaffer at the Boathouse and has been making work there. How long have you worked for Chihuly's studio, Jim? 22 years. Do you have a question? Are these live stream broadcasts going to be available for future viewing? That's a good question. Does anybody here know? It's so new, it's so brand new that we're not sure. But we will find out and we'll let the audience know. They put them on the webpage and they'll on the streaming channel, and you can go back and view it later. It takes time. Well, we got to speed that up. We want it there tomorrow. We know people that can make that happen. All right, so you can see that Jim is really adding some more detail. Now, I was talking to you guys, I missed, but they added a couple of eyes, and right now he's pulling out the mouth or the beak of the dragon. Now, I know sometimes in some of the older versions of the Italian-style dragons, they would add a little tongue. Jim, are you going to add a little tongue to this? I am. You are. I think so. This is really great. You can really see how he can really specifically heat the part that he wants to pull. You can see how he shaped the top part. It's got a nice little curl to it. So in our live streaming, we do that quite a bit, or we have done that quite a bit at the studio of the Corning Museum of Glass. So they actually started that, and when Jim there, I actually watched a streaming event that he did where he was making some goblets when he was teaching class over there. And that was, a couple years after they had it, so I know that they post those sometime after. So Jason, he's got a rod of red glass. He's heating the tip of it there in the torch, that torch flame, that's that little fluffy torch. If he just tried to put that in the hot torch, it would just crack and break and explode. But the fluffy torch is soft enough where he can just heat the tip of it. This type of glass we refer to as soft glass. So, doesn't handle thermal shock very well. If it heats up too quickly, it breaks very easily. Now, I don't know if you've been up to our flame working demonstration, but they're using borosilicate glass up there, and they actually take rods of cold glass, borosilicate, and they can stick it right into the flame, and it doesn't crack and break. Sometimes they'll make little animals out of it, small vessels. So Jason is just pulling that to a little smaller thread. It's amazing that he can touch one end of that rod and it's cold. The other end is very, very hot. You can tell by the color of it how dark it is. I believe he's going to get ready to lay that in there pretty soon. Now, what is a dragon without horns, right? So you can see he cut that bit off at a point. He pulls it up gradually to a nice point. Yeah, I'll come up there and get your question. It's kind of hard to hear back here, especially with the torch. Yeah. Where did he get his inspiration for this dragon? Well, Jim has been working on this series, and his inspiration come from the Italian style dragons that they do. Yep. So you could actually go up into the collection and see maybe a dragon similar to this that was made in the 17th century, but they were much smaller. So usually you would see these on the side of a pitcher or maybe the stem of a goblet. It's a very famous goblet made with this style of dragon that the Venetians are well known for. Yeah. How much would a piece like this cost? You know, that's a good question. I probably can't afford it myself, but I will ask Jim. Jim, see, and this isn't just a dragon that he just would make and sell. This goes along with I believe this is going to end up on a lid for another very tall vessel, maybe about this tall, with maybe a couple dragons on the side of it. So, Jim, can you give us a price range of what your work sells for in a gallery with a piece like this added onto it? Around 15 grand, yeah. You're welcome. Did anybody else have any questions up here? You got a question? You forgot it. Well, I'm going to be here all day. If you remember it, you can get my attention, and we'll try to answer it. What's your question? The oven that we're putting the piece into is 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 1150 degrees Celsius. You probably don't know about Celsius, though, do you? All right, so he's adding one of the front legs. You can see the detail that he's adding. He's cutting them with the scissors to actually make the claws. Who's doing the really big things? Well, in order to make really large work, you have to just keep going back into the furnace and gathering again and again. So usually when you make large scale work, you have to scale up on everything. The size of the blowpipe. You'd want to, you know what? Hold that thought. I'm going to go get a blowpipe that you would make a large scale piece with. So this pipe in my right hand, this is a goblet pipe. So you would make, a Venetian style goblet with this one. The large scale work you're talking about is a pipe like this. So here, I'll bring this up. You can pick this up and get a feel of how heavy the pipe is. So you could probably put 100 pounds of glass on that pipe. Yeah, that's pretty heavy. And you can feel the difference of this one. This is a goblet pipe. Yep, so if you were going to make, say, a large vessel that Jim would make a top for, you would take this pipe and maybe gather about 6 times. Maybe give you 70, 75 pounds of glass. But it's a different style of working than what he's doing now. He's doing very intricate, work where he's adding each bit, the detail. But like I said, this is going to go on the top of a lid that'll be on top of one of those vessels. I assume, I didn't ask Jim, but I assume that they're all attached hot. Some are, some aren't. Having a 50-pound blob of honey on the end of a blowpipe, that's when things get really interesting, because when the glass is hot and soft, it adds a lot more torque to the iron. It's harder to turn the rod when the glass is hot and soft because it's moving. When it starts to stiffen up, it's still really heavy, but it's easier to control because it's stiff. So again, just keeping that bottom section hot. One thing that happens when you're reheating in the reheating furnace, deep inside of the reheating furnace, it's really hot. So the front of it wants to heat up more than the back of it. So he can adjust that by torching the bottom, getting it a little warmer before they flash it. And you can see when he comes out, the front of it's got that just light orange glow. So this is going to be one of the wings. Now, how Jason brought the wing, they attached it to the bottom and he pulled it up, and then Jim cut it at an angle. And you can see how it made it wider at the top. Now he used those crimp tools to put texture all over the wing. Usually they'll take a pair of shears and cut up around the edge of it. I'm not sure that's what he's going to do. But you can see with the temperature just right, he's able to grab the tip of the wing and draw it up. He gives it that very beautiful shape. All right, so here comes the second wing. You can see it's moving around quite a bit. Eric give it a really good flash. He's still controlling, keeping it on center. And even though it's still pretty hot, Jim is using that fluffy torch just to add a little temperature. Yes. How do they change color? Well, right now we're using this color out of a colored tank. So we're going to probably use this all week long. I mean, most of the things that he'll make that he wants to use the color pot for, it'll be with this color. Now, if we wanted to switch colors, we would have to drain the tank or scoop it out with a scoop. And then we would wash it by adding clear glass, usually around the top of the pot, and let that wash down over it, and it pulls all the color down to the bottom. We'll scoop that out, maybe do that a few times to make sure all the color's out, and then add a different one. So if he wanted to add, say, a black wings to this blue glass, we have crushed up colored glass called frit. We can gather clear, roll it in the frit, heat it up, and use the color that way. This is a really nice way to make very consistent colored glass. Because it's coming out of the same pot, it's going to be exactly the same. Sometimes if you're making a piece and you can get different variations of the color, because I could roll it in one time and have a light color, roll it in twice and it'll be darker. With this way, it's always the same. What happened to the what? The tongue. What happened to the tongue? Well, I'm sure that Jim's been thinking ahead about the tongue, and he probably wants to put it in towards the end, because something thin is going to heat up and get distorted if you put it on early. All those flashes, all those heats, or, it could break very easily also. So that's probably one of the last things that he'll add. Now, I'm sure that Jim has a specific sequence that he adds these bits. If he was to make this again, he would make it the same way. He would, start with the body, do the trail, and then add each one of the bits in the same succession that he has up until now with this piece. This bottom one here? Let's take a look. No, just switch it to...
Seems like every time I turn the oven on, that's what it does.
Yeah, it's right there is what you're going to run. So I believe that they're going to add the tail on the bottom with this bit. So he has been adding one bit and then clipping it in half. So he cuts it at an angle. Cuts it in half. Then he can add the texture with the crimp tool. And usually with the small stem for a dragon cup, they would reattach that tail to the edge of it. With this, I think that most of the time he's been leaving them off. So it's not attached to the body. Now at that point, he actually grabbed the bit and kind of pulled it out a little bit to make it a little more narrow, make the joint very nice. Remember the tongue? I seen Jim just grab the red glass. I think that he's going to add the tongue. So again, Jason's just heating that up. It's very thin, so it heats up very quickly. He's just using the MAP gas. So Jim's just telling Eric how he wants him to hold the pipe. He said he wants him to let it fall forward, falling away. When he's ready to add the tongue, he's going to flip it over so he can stick the tongue in his mouth. See, it's on the bottom side. When Jim's ready, he'll tell Eric to flip it, hold it at an angle. And there he is. He's sticking it in there. He pulls it thin, and just by touching it with the tweezers, or he just breaks it free, just like that. So with all the pieces that we made earlier, at this point, Jim would flash it 5 or 6 times. Really get the temperature even from the top to the bottom. Use the torch to really spot heat the bottom of the piece. Right now he's just making sure that a tongue is attached very well. This is where Eric has to be very careful. The tongue is hanging out of its mouth. It'll get too hot too fast if he stays in there too long, and it'll drip on the side of its jaw. So he wants to just heat it hot enough. You can see it hasn't moved a bit. This is where he's evening the temperature. So he's going to flash this again. Jason's getting suited up. He's pretty close. think he's adding a little extra temperature to the tongue, because when they break it free, they tap it with the paddle. If that's too cold, it'll pop right off of there. All right, we're getting pretty close now. Now right there where he's heating is right behind that jack line. This time he'll be able to squeeze it down. Jason's going to heat the gloves. At the very end, once you're ready to put the piece away, you want to make sure that the gloves are warm. If you touch the piece with cold gloves, you can crack it and break it very easily. So he gets right underneath of it. You can see it's moving around. Wants to give it one more flash. So here he's going to carefully put a couple drops of water right there on the punty connection. Eric's got a pair of shears in his hand. They're going to put this into the oven where it's going to slowly cool down.